For as the light of the morning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, and covereth the whole earth, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Therefore sanctify yourselves, that your minds become single to God, and the days will come that you shall see him. For he will unveil his face unto you, and it shall be in his own time, and in his own way, and according to his own will. This is Unveiling Jesus Christ.
Hi, welcome to another podcast on Unveiling Jesus Christ. We find ourselves at the end of January of 2024. We're already down to the last two verses in Revelation chapter 1, which just confirms the old saying that time flies when you're having fun. So today we're going to be talking about Revelation 1 verses 19 and 20. Since we're covering these two verses, and some of it is a little bit redundant with some of the information we've already talked about in prior verses, this is going to be a relatively short podcast, so you can breathe a sigh of relief about that, I suppose, but fasten your seatbelts because we're going to get going, and you'll need to remain in your seats securely fastened until the captain's turned off the seatbelt sign and the aircraft has come to a complete stop. So I'm John Cassanet. I welcome you to another podcast on Unveiling Jesus Christ. And we're going to jump right in to Revelation chapter 1, verse 19, which says, quote, "Write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter." Close quote. Notice in this verse that John is directed to write three different things while he's still in the Spirit. From prior podcasts, you'll recall that John was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, which was Sunday, the first day of the week. And while in the Spirit, he started receiving this information. While still in the Spirit, I'm not sure that he wrote everything on that one day, but he was still in the Spirit as he's now given charge to write the things on three separate subject matters. His first charge was to write the things which thou hast seen. Notice how the verb tense is past tense, so things that he has seen already in the past. That would consist of his vision of Jesus Christ in Revelation chapter 1 up to this point in his vision. The second charge that he's given is to write the things which are. Notice the verb tense here is present tense. So he's about to write and describe in the book of Revelation the things which are, consisting of essentially those things which he sees concerning the current conditions of the seven churches in Asia Minor as recorded in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. The third thing that he is charged to write are the things which shall be hereafter. This consists of those things that are recorded in Revelation chapter 4 through 22. Now notice the verb tense here again is changed again. It is now future tense, things which shall be hereafter. And so I think most scholars agree, and I agree, that the future tense is used to depict those things which are described in Revelation chapter 4 through 22, although and the majority of things that John sees clearly are in the future, but they're not exclusively in the future. For example, we're going to get a flashback in Revelation chapter 12 that takes us all the way back to the premortal existence. So don't let that fool you, saying everything future tense is about the future, because it's things that he's going to see in the future, some of which relate to things that happened in the past. Now, this Greek phrase that is rendered hereafter in this particular verse means after these things. In other words, after John sees the condition of the seven churches in their current condition, then the hereafter means after I show you these current conditions, then I want you then to record the things that are going to happen in chapters 4 through 22. And so keep in mind that the book of Revelation is primarily a prophetic book that deals mostly with the second coming, and it begins in Revelation 4, which starts out saying, quote, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. Notice how John in Revelation 4:1 uses the same verbiage that he uses here in Revelation 1:19. In other words, in verse 1 of chapter 4, John is told by an angel, I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And that's the same information and language or phraseology that you find in Revelation 1:19 that talks about things which shall be hereafter. So the two have a connectedness by the use of the same words, which tends to confirm that when John is told to write the vision of things which must be hereafter, the starting point for things hereafter would be verse 1 in Revelation chapter 4. Now, it's kind of interesting that Nephi was able to see many of the same things that John saw in his vision. When we look at 1 Nephi chapter 14, this is part of what is called the Apocalypse of Nephi. And in that verse, Nephi was specifically told by an angel the following, quote, And behold, the things which this apostle of the Lamb shall write are many things which thou hast seen, and behold, the remainder shalt thou see. Period, close quote. So here in this verse we see Nephi being told that you're going to see a whole bunch of things that John the Revelator saw, but you're not going to be able to write them all because that job was given to John the Revelator to write the things which he saw, the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. And so Nephi's version is a somewhat limited version, even though he actually got to see everything that John got to see. And I discussed this more in my first podcast that I did back on September 30th, 2023. That podcast is entitled John, He's the Guy. And the essence of that podcast is how John was foreordained to write the revelation and the content of the book that we now call the book of Revelation. So if you look at this direction that John is given here in verse 19, you'll notice that the content is specifically dictated by what Christ tells John to write in this verse. And in a sense, Revelation 1:19 serves as a table of contents or an outline for the entire book. And so John he's kind of like a good lawyer. Don't hold that against me. But the reason I say that is because when a lawyer is making his closing argument with a jury and to persuade the jurors about his or her particular point of view, we have a certain rule that we kind of follow about how a closing argument is supposed to go. And so essentially what you learn from all of these continuing legal education courses is you tell the jurors what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them what it is that you want them to know, and then you tell them what you told them. So this is John at the introduction of his closing argument. He's telling us what he's going to tell us, right? And somewhere in this process, you hope that the jurors can remember what it is that you're saying. Now, I do have to say as an aside, the other thing that they typically tell you in these continuing legal education courses is half the jurors make up their mind after the opening statement. So long before you ever get to your closing argument, the jurors already made up their mind based on what you told them and what the other guy told them in the opening statement. So hopefully as we embark on the book of Revelation, you haven't already made up your mind about what it is that John's about to tell us. You have an open mind, your heart is open, and you're willing to listen to the Spirit as it prompts you to learn new things going through the book of Revelation. But, based on what we've already seen about the vision of Jesus Christ, I'm hopeful that you've already made up your mind about him at least, and what you've already seen in the visions that we find in Revelation chapter 1. Now, notice how in this verse, as I've mentioned, we have three things past, things now, things future. So what are the things that John is really talking about? And we find this, I think, reflected in Doctrine and Covenants section 93:24, which states, quote, "And the truth is knowledge of things as they are, and as they were, and as they are to come." Close quote. So we get this same threesome of things past, present, and future, only in this context it's talking about truth. And that's essentially what the book of Revelation consists of: truth of things past, truth of things present, and truth of things that are yet future. And it's not just things, it's this truth which is defined here in verse 24 of section 93 as knowledge of things. And so keep in mind that this isn't saying truth is a knowledge of things, or it's not saying truth is the knowledge of thing. Truth is knowledge. Knowledge itself, information, intelligence, light, spirit. Truth is the sum of all existence, as we have in one of our Latter-day Saint hymns called "Oh, Say What Is Truth." And so it's very important to understand this concept. Elder John Widsoe, who was an apostle in the church, said, quote, "Truth is synonymous with accurate knowledge or a product of it." Close quote. And so if we kind of dive into this concept of truth just a little bit more, it's kind of interesting to note that in the American dictionary used during Joseph Smith's lifetime, truth was defined as, quote, "conformity to fact or reality, exact accordance with that which is or has been or shall be." Close quote. Now, I doubt if you look in your dictionary today, or if you want to check out Google's dictionary or whatever it comes up on, that's not what the definition is going to be. We live in a very relativistic world, and everything is considered. There is no absolute truth. Everything's relative, right? But that wasn't the way it was in the time of John, because he's talking about truth of a knowledge, which is knowledge of things past, present, and future, and it doesn't change. It's something that doesn't change day to day. It doesn't change based on social norms or relativism that exists in the world today. And so as we embark on this greater study of the book of Revelation, you have to keep in mind that it's truth, absolute truth, whether it be past, things present, things future, doesn't really matter. So let's move on. We'll talk briefly about Revelation chapter 1, verse 20, which states, quote, "The mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches." Close quote. Now, this verse is largely giving us information that we've covered in prior podcasts. It's going back and saying, remember, I talked about these 7 stars, and now I'm giving you an explanation of what they are. I also talked about these 7 golden candlesticks, and now I'm giving you an explanation as to what they are, so there's no confusion. You have that foundation to build on as you continue the visions that you're going to see, because these are going to be images that are going to be repeated. So the Lord felt that it was important for John to understand these particular symbols in the book of Revelation, as well as John's hearers and the readers of the book of Revelation, so that you kind of have this little bit of a foundation to build on. So we've kind of covered them already, and I'm not going to go into them in greater detail, but I want to talk about for just a moment the concept of mystery, because that's the word that is used here in Revelation 1:20 when it talks about the mystery of the 7 stars and the mystery of the 7 golden candlesticks. Here they are explained, so they really are no longer a mystery. But what is a mystery? It's basically something that is hidden. It can be something obscure, unknown, up until the point, of course, when it's disclosed. Once it's disclosed, then it's no longer really a mystery. Now, most of the mysteries, when we think of the church, when we think of the gospel, when we think of scripture and the mysteries, most mysteries deal with the end of time, or what we would call eschatological events. And so once that it's disclosed, a mystery then becomes clear and it becomes as comprehensible as any other truth. And typically, and almost always, the mystery is something that has to be revealed through the Spirit and through the power of revelation. It can be a divine or direct revelation. It can be something that comes through the still small voice. It can be something that is revealed to us, as in this case of this verse, where the Lord actually tells us what the mystery is, so that we have the benefit of the Lord's revelation specifically recorded in Scripture. And so essentially, until that time when you get these things revealed, the truth is oftentimes revealed through these symbols that remain mysterious until they are explained. And now that these have been explained to John, they're no longer a mystery. Now, many symbols are based on a number of different things. They include symbols that are based on nature, symbols that are based on known facts, symbols based on customs or a general opinion, something that people are generally familiar with. And these objects that are generally known from nature, facts, customs, general opinion, whatever it might be, we take those and it gets incorporated into some type of truth or gospel principle that makes them kind of like they're a mystery, unless you understand the connection between the symbol and the truth that is being expounded upon. Now, let me illustrate this just a little bit with a movie quote. So to set the stage, hopefully you've had the opportunity to see the very adorable movie called Babe. It's the story about the little pig that is saved from the butcher shop. He ends up on Hoggett Farm, and of course all the animals, including the pig called Babe, can talk and communicate and everything like that. And so one morning, shortly after Babe had arrived at Hoggett Farm, Fly, the female dog, was walking with Babe, and they're headed toward the farmhouse. And the dogs go in, and the puppies all go in to get some chow. And Fly stops Babe at the door and says, "You can't go in." No pigs allowed in the house, right? And so Fly basically explains to Babe that pigs and other farm animals other than dogs and cats are not allowed in the farmhouse. And she says, "That's just the way things are." And so essentially, when we think about things like symbols that are based on nature, known facts, custom, or general opinion, these symbols they're based on things that's just the way things are. And if we accept the way things are and then incorporate them into a symbol, then it helps us to learn something, and it teaches us something. And this is why the Savior so often in his parables relies on plants and the olive tree, the fig tree, and other things like this, that the way that these things operate in real life are just the way things are. And if once you understand that, you can translate that into the imagery of symbols. Now, I also have to tell you that the way things are is not always absolute, right? So around my house growing up, we wouldn't allow dogs or cats in the house either. So we didn't allow pigs, but we didn't allow dogs or cats either. And at our house, that's the way things are. And so keep in mind that the way things are again, are known facts and customs that are generally known. And so I think if we rely on the Hoggett Farm as the way things are, you get one kind of outcome. If you rely on the way it was at the Cassinet house, you get a slightly different outcomes. Now, it just turns out so happens that in the Cassinet household, excluding dogs from the house is consistent with what John had revealed to him in the book of Revelation, because in Revelation chapter 22, verse 15, which depicted the celestial kingdom, so John's having a vision of those who are allowed into the celestial kingdom. And what does he say? For without are dogs. So, if you take the way things are at the Cassinet house, dogs being excluded, then that would be a good symbol for the celestial kingdom. And certainly, it doesn't mention cats, but I'm sure they should be excluded too from the celestial kingdom. Sorry to all you cat lovers. I really am a dog lover, even though we wouldn't allow them in the house. I am a dog lover, not a cat lover. So my apologies to you cat lovers. But in the way things are in my kingdom, the cats are also with the dogs. And of course, this concept of going back to Babe just a second, pigs of course would not be allowed in heaven either, because according to Jewish custom, they were considered unclean, and you couldn't even associate with pigs. So we've taken the analogy far enough. We can have a lot of fun with Babe, but at any rate, we need to move on. So notice that in verse 20, it talks about these 7 stars, and Christ, as I mentioned, is now explaining the meaning of the 7 stars that John saw in the right hand of Christ. I discussed this previously in a podcast on January 21st of 2024, and so if you want to get more details on what the 7 stars are, you can go back and take a look there. But in a nutshell, or a short version, this is telling us that Christ has the 7 leaders of the 7 churches of Asia in his right hand and upon his right hand. The right hand, of course, being the favorable or preferred position. This is confirmed in Matthew chapter 25, verses 32 through 33, which states, quote, "And before Christ shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left." Close quote. And so, I've used this verse a lot of times in speaking, because you'll know by now, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, I'm a sheep man at heart. I grew up on a sheep ranch, and so I'm a sheep guy. And so as I would talk about this particular verse, and everybody knew that I was a sheepman, I'd get up and I'd talk about these sheep, these loving sheep, these cuddly sheep, these wonderful sheep, tender sheep, yes, precious sheep. Because that's what Jesus is telling us, right? The goats are on the left. Those nasty, tick-ridden, low-life goats, they're on the left. So, at any rate, the point is that the right hand is the preferred or favorable hand. Now, I have to add one other little footnote here to all of this. It was kind of fun, because back when I was in Sacramento giving my talks on all kinds of sheep, there was this Brother Montgomery in the Sacramento stake. He used to be the stake president of the stake, and we got along very well. We were always ribbing each other about something. Well, Brother Montgomery grew up in Heber, Utah, where they had a cattle ranch. So right here in the middle of our sacrament meetings, and sometimes even in stake conference, we'd have the range wars going on, where I'm quoting about how great sheep are, and I'd always have to say some despicable remark about the cattlemen and the range wars and stuff like that. It's amazing that the stake even survived. But we did. So there's just some points of fun and jostling and joking around. But anyway, so go back and check out my podcast from January 21st if you want to get more information about the 7 leaders of the church represented as these 7 stars. They really represent 7 servants, which John is explaining here. The other thing that John explains here very briefly are that the 7 candlesticks are representative or symbolic of the 7 churches. And again, I go through this in some detail in the prior podcast from January 21st, 24. And that, if just go back and look at that one. So in that podcast, one of the things to keep in mind is to distinguish between what is a candlestick and what is really a lampstand. That's what's being talked about here, and the fact that here we're talking about 7 independent lampstands as distinguished from the one-stemmed menorah. And there are reasons for that, which I've already explained. And so All of these symbols, as I mentioned, are things that John's going to use now as he writes his individual letters to the seven churches. So that kind of concludes my discussion of these particular verses. It's, as I mentioned, kind of a short podcast today. Thanks to Jenna Daly for all her help on the technical end. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. Now, the takeaway from today, I guess, is be a sheep, don't be a goat. But if you have to be anything other than a goat, then you could be a cow and you could be a cattleman. So tomorrow we're going to begin our individual discussion about verses in Revelation chapter 2 through 3 that are the chapters that John is writing to the seven churches. And our focus tomorrow is going to be on the Ephesian saints in Revelation chapter 2, 1 through 3. Now, one other thing I guess I hasten to add is that in a previous podcast on November 5th of 2023, I discussed the geopolitical conditions of the seven churches. Mostly I was talking about the cities themselves and not so much about the churches and the membership in the churches. So if you want to get a good foundational understanding about all the geopolitical conditions that the members of the churches were facing, go back and listen to the previous podcast on November 5th and November 12th. I actually had two of them, but the first one on November 5th discusses the city of Ephesus and the geopolitical conditions that existed, what the city was like on a social level and things like that, some of the other religious beliefs that were prevalent, and I'll touch on them a little bit as we go on. But again, if you really want to know more about them, then that's the place you should go. Now, one other question that you should be asking yourself as we go into chapters 2 and 3 of the book of Revelation is, why do I care about these seven churches anyway? And to me, that's like asking, why do I care about all the war chapters in the Book of Mormon, right? That question gets asked because remember, Nephi was told you should only write on these plates the things that are really important and very sacred. And that was the admonition that got passed down from prophet to prophet who wrote in the Book of Mormon. And yet, as we go into the Book of Alma, that covers just these years and many chapters of the warfare between the Lamanites and the Nephites fighting with their bows and their arrows, swords, scimitars, clubs, slings, all of this stuff. And it's like, why do we even have all this? It would be a lot easier to read the Book of Mormon annual if I just get rid of all the war chapters. It'd be a lot shorter book. Makes it easier to read and follow the admonitions of the prophets to read the Book of Mormon. But those things these things have spiritual meaning to them. Not only how is it that we survive spiritually in a world today where there are wars going on of a spiritual nature all around us, and it's only a short time before there are going to be physical wars where teams are going to be divided along the same kind of lines of religious and non-religious and irreligious and a-religious. I mean, all of these things are going to come down to it, and they're not going to be just spiritual battles. There's going to be physical warfare involved also. And so that's why we need the war chapters helping us to appreciate that. But it's the same reason we have a discussion of the seven churches in the book of Revelation. These seven churches represent the universal church. They represent the church of today. If you want to see what is going on today spiritually and what the Lord has admonished us to do and how to overcome many of the challenges that we're presented with spiritually today, read about the seven churches of Asia. And you get 7 different examples or illustrations of things that happened to them and how they overcame and the consequences of those that fail to overcome. So essentially, they represent the church today. They represent you. They represent me. As I read about these individuals, I say, I see in that group of saints a little bit of myself. Now, that can be a positive thing in some of the churches. It can be a negative thing in other kinds of the things that are said about the members of these churches. But the bottom line is, They represent us today. So be prepared. Gird up your loins. I'll see you tomorrow on another Unveiling Jesus Christ, and we're going to learn about ourselves as we study the 7 churches in Asia.